In this video we will learn about Excel formula basics. Before I take you to the beautiful world of Excel formulas, it is important to understand how formula works and what are its building blocks. Let's get started with what constitutes an Excel formula. Excel formulas are what make a spreadsheet a spreadsheet. This forms the backbone of all the analysis that can be done in Excel. So to start learning formulas, it is imperative that we understand how it is built and what are its constituents. So let me type these three numbers here: 10, 20, 30. Now let me show you very basic things that can be used within a formula. A formula would always start with an equal to sign. So whenever you have an equal to sign, it would indicate that now you would be using a formula. If you do not have it, Excel would not recognize it as a formula. A very simple thing that can be a part of formula is a value. So for example, here if I type equal to 10 and hit enter, this becomes the value of C1. So now it is, again, you would say, why do I need to put an equal to before a 10? I can simply do it, but I'm showing you that this is one of the constituents that can be used in a formula. Similarly, another constituent could be text. So for example, if I type my name in double quotes and hit enter, then this name is entered. So you can see that text can also be used as a constituent. The third constituent could be a cell reference, and a very simple example of it would be equal to A1. And as soon as I hit enter, you can see that in C1 I have the value in A1. If I change this value, if I write my name here, this value would change as well. So you can use a cell reference. And the last thing that you can use is an operator. So for example, here I type equal to A1 plus A2 and I hit enter, and Excel has done this calculation for me, and here this plus sign is the operator. And there are multiple operators in Excel formulas. So I can, for example, use equal to A1 minus A2. Similarly, I can use other operators. So let's see what are the operators that can be used in Excel formulas. Here I have a list of operators that can be used in Excel formulas along with their description. Some are really simple that you use in daily life, some such as addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. Exponentiation is something where you can see 10 to the power 2 or 2 to the power 4. Concatenation is something that would join two numbers or text: equal to, greater than, less than, greater than equal to, less than equal to, and not equal to. So these are the operators. Now let me show you how each of these works. So for example, I have these numbers here: 10, 20 and 30. Now let me show you how each of these works. So in addition, it is really simple: 10 plus 20, and I'm using the cell references here. 10 plus 20 is equal to 30. Similarly, subtraction again: 10 minus 20 is minus 10. In the same fashion, multiplication and division: if you multiply these two numbers, then you get 200, and if you divide 10 by 20, then you get 0.5. Now in case of exponentiation, let me write a smaller number here. I have written 2, and I would say 10 raised to the power 2. And as soon as I hit enter, you can see it says 100. Similarly, I can also use values instead of cell references. This is an important one, which is concatenation. In concatenation, you use this sign ampersand. So you use your keyboard to type ampersand, and you choose the other cell. And when you do this, what it will do, it will join these two values, or these could be text. So it would become 1020, and if I hit enter, you can see it has become 1020. Similarly, you can join two names as well. So for example, I have my name and surname here, and if I want to join these two cells, then I would say this ampersand this, and now when I hit enter, it joins my name. You can see that I have Sumit Bansal without any space. If you want to introduce a space, a good trick would be just use a space here and again use ampersand. So what I'm saying is Sumit ampersand a space ampersand Bansal, and now when I hit enter, it gives me my name with a proper space in between the name and surname. So this is how you can use concatenate. Equal to is a function that would return a logical value. So for example, if I say 10 is equal to 20, which I know is false, and now when I hit enter, it gives me false because this is not correct. But in case I have 10 here, then this would give me true. Let me Control Z and go back. Similarly, I have this option greater than. Again, I would go here and I would say 10 is greater than 20, which is again false, so I get a false. Similarly, it has less than 10 is less than 20, which is true, so it returns a true. Now I also have this option of greater than equal to. So for example, let me have this value 10.1 here. Now if I use this formula, this value is, or maybe not d1, this value d5 is greater than equal to 10, and I hit enter and it says true. But if I change this value to 10.1, again this remains true because this is not greater than but it is equal to. So it assesses these two conditions. It could either be greater than or it could be equal to. If any of this condition matches, then it returns a true. Let me control Z to go back. Similarly, we have less than equal to, so I would hit d1 is less than or equal to this value, and again this is true. If I change this to 9.9, then it becomes false because now 10 is greater than and not less than. And in the end we have not equal to. Not equal to, as the name suggests, would just compare two values. If they are not equal, then it would give you a true, else it would give you a false. So for example, if I compare 10 is not equal to 9.9 and I hit enter, you can see that this gives me true. Suppose if I go to this cell and I create a formula 10 multiplied by 2 plus 20 divided by 2 multiplied by 10. Now can you predict what would be the answer? So how would Excel execute this function? Would it start executing from left to right, right to left, or there are certain operators which are more important and are executed first? Let me show you what the result is. The result is 120. Now let's go back and see what happened. In this case, if I look at it, Excel first calculated this part, which is d1 multiplied by d4. d1 multiplied by d4, this is 20. Then Excel started with this part and this was calculated, d4 d2 divided by d4. So d2 divided by d4 is 10 and this was multiplied by 10. So this became 100 and this became 20. Now I am able to calculate this because I know that there is an order of precedence. I have not added these terms before I have used the multiplication and division operators. Because there is an order of precedence, you can predict what would be the answer, and in these cases it is good to know so that you would get an answer that you expect instead of something random. So let me show you what is the order of precedence. These are the precedence order number and these are the operators. So exponential would get the highest preference if we have something like this. If I say 10 raised to the power 2 plus 10, then in this case you would be able to predict that first this would be executed and then 10 would be added to it. So if I hit enter, I would know that the answer would be 110. Similarly, the second order of precedence falls with division and multiplication. So if in a formula there is division or multiplication, it would be executed before all these signs. The third is plus and minus. The fourth is concatenation, and the last in this series is equal to, greater than, less than, greater than equal to, or less than equal to. Now what if you want to override these precedents? You can do this by using round brackets or parentheses. So for example, let me take the same example. I would say 10 raised to the power 2 plus 10. Now in this case, what if I want to add these two first and then make it 10 to the power that number? So if I have to do this, I would use round brackets, and when I use round brackets, it overwrites the order of precedence. So in this case, whatever is within the bracket would be executed first and then the order of precedence would kick in. So in this case it would become 10 raised to the power 12. As soon as I hit enter, you can see it gives me a huge number, which is 10 raised to the power 12. Similarly, if you have a huge formula, you can absolutely forget this order of precedence and only use parentheses to make sure that something that you need to be executed first is actually executed first because it is in round brackets. So this is one way to completely forget about it, but anyways, it is a good idea to know this order of precedence so that it gives you the answer that you expect. Now there are two ways you can insert a formula in an Excel worksheet. So for example, let me say I want to insert an average formula here in this cell. One of the ways is to go to the formula tab, and within this tab you have this option insert function. You can also use the keyboard shortcut Shift F3, and as soon as you click Shift F3 you can see that Excel automatically inserts an equal to sign, because it now knows that you are going to insert a formula, and you can search for the formula. So if you are new to Excel and you do not know the formula that you want to use to find the average, then you can simply type the word average here and click on go. And as soon as you click on go, you can see that this would give you a list of functions that can do this work for you, so they can average it for you. Now it may not always be very accurate, it may give you a list of all these functions and you may have to scroll down and see what you want, but you would have these lines here that can help you guide in choosing the right function. So in this case I want to choose average. I would click on that average and I would click on OK, and as soon as I do it, it inserts this function and opens the function arguments dialog box. This is the dialog box where I would insert the argument. So if there is a function, it would always have a couple of arguments. It could be either a single argument, it could be more than one arguments, or there could be functions which do not take any arguments, such as a today function that would simply give you the date, or now function that would give you the date and time. So average actually has a couple of arguments in it. If you see here, it has two fields, number 1 and number 2, and it also has some description below. So it says returns the average arithmetic mean of its arguments, which can be numbers or names, arrays or references that contain numbers. And since I've clicked on number 1 field, it also gives me a short description of this argument, which says number 1, number 2 are 1 to 255 numeric arguments for which you want the average. So here I could type a number, here I could type a cell reference, and I could have 255 of these arguments within one average function. And as soon as I type something here, so for example I type 10 here, it would also give me the formula result. Since I only have one argument as of now, the average is 10, but if I go and type 20 here, you can see that the formula result changes to 15. If you're not even able to use the function properly after this window, you can also go to the help on this function. So if you click on it, you would see that Excel opens the help for you. If you're using 2010, then the window might look different, but again the help would open. So this is one way, and Microsoft Help is probably the best place to learn about Microsoft Excel functions. It may go a bit in detail, but again I would reiterate, this is the best place to learn about Excel functions. Now when I click OK, I would have the result, and if you look at the formula bar, I have the entire formula along with the arguments. Now this is one way, but this is not the most efficient way, and people who have been using Excel would agree that the most efficient way would be to simply type equal to and start typing the name of the function. So let me show you what happens as soon as I start typing. As soon as I type A, I have this list of functions, this entire list of functions, and I can choose what function I want because all these start with A. But if I know I want to use the average function, I would continue typing. I would type V, and as soon as I type V, it would give me the name of all the functions that start with A and V. And let me type average, and as soon as I continue to type, it would give me filter this list and only give me those functions that start with these alphabets. So I know it is average. I can simply hit tab, and if the function is selected and this is the function that I want to use, if I hit tab, this would auto-complete the function. If this is not the function I want to use, then I can navigate this list by using the arrow keys. In this case I want to use average, so I would hit tab. As soon as I hit tab, it auto-completes the function. Now if you want to go to the help for this function, you can simply click on it, and if I click on this, you can see it opens the Excel help. But I do not want to go to the Excel help. I want to open the argument box where I can insert these arguments. There are two ways to do it. Again, you can click on FX or simply use the keyboard shortcut Shift F3, and as soon as you use Shift F3, it opens the function arguments dialog box, and you can insert these arguments. If you do not want to use these arguments, you can go and manually, so for example let me type again average, I hit tab to auto complete the function, and here I can manually type these. Now these could be numbers that I'm typing in, so for example 10 and 20, and I hit enter and this gives me 15, or these could be cell references. So here I use 10, here I have 10, here I have 20, and I go to this cell, and instead of these numbers I would use the cell references. So to use the cell references, I could manually select one by one. I have D1 comma D2, and I close the bracket and hit enter. It gives me the right result. or I can simply select it at one go, and it says D1 is to D2, and it would consider this entire range. And now when I close the bracket and hit enter, it gives me the same answer again. In this case, I had these cell references in this sheet only, but you can have it in a different sheet as well. So for example, here I have another sheet and I have these numbers 10, 20 and 30. Now if I again go back to the function, type average, hit tab to autocomplete the function, and here instead of selecting these, I can also go to the another sheet and select these functions. So for example, I can select these three, and you can see here in formula bar, can drag this down. You can see here in formula bar it has this entire reference. It says sheet 3 exclamation mark C3 is to C5. So this is the convention that Excel follows when you are referencing other sheets. And now I would close the tab and hit enter, and it gives me the right result because it is averaging 10, 20 and 30. So this is how you can use references in an Excel formula. You can either use values, you can use text, you can use references. If you have a formula in Excel, you can edit it by going to the formula bar. So here, as soon as you select the cell, you would see the formula in the formula bar, and when you select the formula, you would see if there are any references that would get highlighted in different colors. In this case, I only had one reference, so it is using blue color, but if you have multiple references, then Excel would use multiple colors. So the easiest way is to just go to the formula bar and edit this formula. You can also go to this cell directly and double click, and as soon as you double click, it enters into the edit mode. You can also enter into the edit mode by pressing F2, and as soon as you press F2, you see now you can edit this formula. So these are the ways you can change a formula or edit it or modify it. If you're learning about Excel formulas, to know about referencing, cell referencing is really important. There are three ways you can reference a cell, and in terms of Excel, these are called absolute referencing, relative referencing and mixed referencing. Let me show you what this means. So for example, a very simple example is if I go to this cell and I press equal to and I click on A1 and I hit enter, then this is a simple example of relative cell referencing, where if I drag this down, you can see that the cell references changes and it is now relative to the row it is in and the column it is in. So for example, here this refers to A1, this cell refers to A2, this cell refers to A3, and so on. This cell refers to A10. If I copy this formula, if I control C, go here and copy this formula, this cell would refer to A18. Similarly, if I go to the right and I go here and I press control V, this cell would refer to F1. The reason being that this was referring to a cell which was 2 cell left to it. Similarly, this is again referring to a cell which is 2 cell left to it. So this is called relative cell referencing, when your cell reference changes in relation to where your position of the cell is. Now let me clean this. Let me show you an example of absolute cell referencing. And absolute cell referencing means that it will not change no matter where you put it. And to do that, a simple convention is you use a dollar sign. And here I would put dollar sign. Dollar sign would mean that if it is in front of the column alphabet, which is A, it would mean that this column number would not change if you copy this reference. Similarly, if it is in front of the row number, then it means that this row number would not change no matter where you put it. So for example, now let me click enter. I copy this and I paste it somewhere here. Again, if I go and put it into edit mode by clicking F2, you can see it still refers to A1. No matter where you put it in this, it would still refer to A1. So this is absolute cell referencing, where no matter where you put it, it would still refer to the same location to which it referred originally. An important trick here is that if you go and click on the cell reference, you can change these by clicking F4. So now if I hit F4, you can see that the dollar sign in front of A goes away. Similarly, the dollar sign in front of 1 would go away if I press again. If I press F4 again, and now it is in front of A. And now if I press it for the third time, it becomes a relative cell reference. Now what you just saw, a dollar sign in front of A but not in front of 1, or the vice versa, a dollar sign in front of 1 but not in front of A, that is called a mixed reference. So now that we have understood relative cell reference and absolute cell reference, let's go and understand mixed cell reference. Here I have some data set, and say I want to do a simple thing. I want to divide all these numbers by 100 and put these here, and I want to divide all these numbers by 1000 and put these numbers here. So to do that, I would select 10, divide this by 100, and I would hit enter. It gives me the right result, which is 0.1, but now if I drag this down, it gives me the wrong result. And I'm sure you would have identified by now that if I check this, since this was not an absolute cell reference, it dragged this down. So now when I put it down, it had shifted by one row here and by one row here, but I do not want this value to shift. I only want this value to shift. So I would do a simple thing. I would make this absolute, and to do that I would hit F4 once, and now when I drag this down, you can see that it works perfectly. This is 0.1, it is supposed to be 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, so these are the right results. But what happens when I drag this to the right? It gives me 1, but I should be getting 0.1 because 100 divided by 1000 is 0.1. The reason being that now when I made the denominator absolute, no matter where I drag this, it would always be referring to this cell only, and this is not what I want. I want that while I drag this down, it should refer to this cell, but when I go to the right, it should refer to this cell, which means that I want to make it partially absolute, or what they call mixed reference. So to do that, I would simply go here, and if you check this, I want this to move across columns, but I do not want it to move across rows, which means that I would want a dollar sign in front of the row number but not before the column number. So I would hit F4, and I have what I want now. I would hit enter. Now if I drag this down, it gives me the right result, and now if I drag this to the right, it gives me the right result as well. I can again simply drag this down. Now if you go to any of these cells, you would see that now it refers to the right cell references. You can drag this again to the right. I do not have the data, so it gives me an error, but you can see that it would shift based on these. But if you drag this value down, it would still keep on referring to this value, which means that you have fixed the row number but you have not fixed the column number. So this is called mixed referencing. Now these are very important in formulas. You may have a huge data set and you want to create a cell reference, and if you, as soon as you drag this down, it can completely jeopardize if you do not know how to work with absolute, relative, or mixed cell references. Now as you go forward in this course and learn about a lot of formulas, you would notice that in some cases you have to create really huge formulas which are really complicated, and it may become a bit tedious if it returns an error. So for example, you might not be able to identify where is the error. You may have to revisit the entire formula. Excel has some features that can make it easy for you. So for example, let me type a very simple formula. As of now I'm using a very simple formula because you have not gone through this course, but you can have any formula here and this trick would work. So I would use sum and I would add these two, plus I would use sum again, add these two, and then let's use average and add these three. Now when I hit enter, this gives me the result as 160. If for example this is not the result that you expect, or if there is an error in this result, then you can check where the error is by going to the formula tab, and within this go to the formula auditing option, and here you have this option evaluate formula, and as soon as you click on evaluate formula, you would see that evaluate formula window opens up with the entire formula in this part which says evaluation. Now click on this button once and it would give you the result of the first part of your formula. When you click on evaluate twice, it gives you the result of the second part, and similarly when you click on it and again keep on clicking on it, it would keep on doing these operations for you, and you would see that this is the result. And now again if I click evaluate, this is the final result. Now for example, there is an error, and let me purposely introduce an error. Let me purposely introduce the error. Here is only. So I would say I want to divide this number by 0. Now I know if I divide any number by 0, it would give me an error. So here is the error. I know it, but imagine that if this is a huge formula and you want to identify where the error is, go to evaluate formula, this opens the evaluate formula dialog box and hit evaluate. And as you are doing it, you would notice that at some point of time it would say division, and you would be able to identify that this is the step where you have the error. So you would know that the first two steps are working fine, but the third step is something where you have the division error. Let me control Z and go back to the original formula. Now there is another way of debugging formulas, and this is the way that I prefer, because using this you can really go granular. So for example, you have this entire formula. If you just want to see the result of this part, then select it using your mouse or by using the F2 key and then using the arrow keys, and press F9. And as soon as you press F9, Excel would evaluate and give you the result of only that part which is selected. So now I know that the last part of this formula returned 60. I would control Z and go back. Similarly, I can select only this part and hit F9, and this gives me 70. Let me control Z and go back. I can select parts of it. So I would select this entire part, these two parts, and I press F9, and this gives me the result. So this is a really powerful way of debugging your formulas. Just be careful of one thing. So for example, if I go to this formula, I select this, I press F9, it gives me 60. But remember to control Z and go back to the original formula, because if you do not, if you click enter, then this value 60 gets hard coded in the formula, which was not originally there. So your formula would go away. Just be a bit cautious. Do remember to control Z when you do this. So these are two powerful ways to audit your formula or to debug your formula. That is it in this video. I hope you found this useful. Thank you and have a nice day.